Thank you very much. I want to start out by saying how honored I am to be asked to be part of this conference. Honored both because of the great strides that Lithuania has made and also because it allowed me to be invited to this beautiful city. I had never seen it before last night. I was dazzled by it. And in fact, I posted a picture on Twitter from my dinner table overlooking the cathedral with my beautiful bowl of beet soup and my glass of wine in front of me. And the tweet said, "Manfully doing my duty no matter what the cost." It has been a very pleasant time that I've had in Vilnius. I can contribute nothing whatsoever to the rest of the afternoon. You are going to have panels on specifics of what has been accomplished over the last 25 years and specifics about what yet needs to be done. I am not an economist, I am not an administrator, I am not a politician, and I am not any sort of expert on Eastern Europe. What I hope I can do in these opening remarks is to elaborate on something I noticed in the program. The program's sessions are entitled "The Road to Freedom," and then a subtitle, not "The Road to Riches," not "The Road to Wealth." And I think that is a very important distinction to make. There has been among intellectuals in the United States, and I think among intellectuals in Europe, and perhaps some of the common ordinary citizens in Europe, the idea that the fall of communism and of the Soviet Empire was a necessary thing, and it had to happen, but it's kind of too bad that we can no longer look to socialism as the solution. That yes, it is true that capitalism does indeed produce wealth, much more than socialism ever did, but capitalism does not have the nice, warm, fuzzy idealism of socialism, that socialism wanted a better world in a way that capitalism does not. We have to go back to first principles. The reason that these changes are good are not because they introduced capitalism to Eastern Europe and a little bit to Russia. Rather, capitalism is the economic expression of freedom. And it is freedom that is the larger object in all of this. And furthermore, the reason that freedom is the object has nothing to do with money, and it has everything to do with the pursuit of individual human happiness. If you step back and ask, what is the purpose of government? Step back as far as you can to give the most profound answer. I think that most profound answer is the purpose of government is to better enable its citizens to pursue happiness. Now, I suppose that at this point I must be sure to define what I mean by happiness. My definition is very ordinary. It comes straight from Aristotle's Ethics. And to summarize what Aristotle is saying in a way that many other people have phrased it, happiness is lasting and justified satisfaction with life as a whole. The two key words in that are lasting and justified. Lasting means that happiness does not consist of momentary pleasures. A cold beer is pleasurable, sex is pleasurable, a good movie is pleasurable, but they don't last all that long. They are not the stuff of happiness. The phrase justified means that there is a reason for you to take satisfaction in whatever it is that is causing you happiness. And you're talking about your life as a whole, not any one component of it. So now let me put a question to you. If we can agree that happiness consists of lasting and justified satisfactions, what are the arenas, what are the institutions through which we achieve those satisfactions? And I want to give you a challenge. I am going to tell you there are just 4 such institutions. I have been making this challenge to audiences for many years now. The 4 that I have in mind are family, community, faith, and vocation. By vocation, I mean not just paid work at a job. Being a mother can be a vocation. Being devoted to a cause for which you are not paid money, that can also be a vocation. But I am saying that's all there is: family, community, faith, and vocation. You do not have to be engaged in all 4 of those to be happy. There are happy atheists, there are happy single people. But you had better be engaged in 1 or 2 or 3 of those 4 at least if you are going to have the kinds of satisfactions that allow you to reach my age, I'm 72, and look back on who you have been and what you have done and take satisfaction in that. Now, if that's the case, the next question becomes, how are those institutions to be helped by government to be rich and vital and rewarding vessels for individuals? And the answer to that question, I think, ultimately is that those institutions are rich and vital insofar as they take advantage of the sort of all-purpose resource for making those institutions work, and those are intimate human relationships. Think about it for a minute. Family, it's obvious that the satisfactions of family are extraordinarily linked to intimate human relationships. It's just as obvious that the satisfactions of community are linked to those relationships. Faith, well, technically you can practice a faith by yourself, but almost everybody who is engaged in a faith tradition is engaged in one in which the interactions with fellow believers are crucial to what they take away from it. Vocation? Okay. There are some vocations that can be practiced sitting by yourself in front of a computer screen all day by yourself. I am one of those people whose vocation tells me to do that and has me do that. However, it is also true that my relationships with colleagues are a very important aspect of the satisfactions from that. And I would go further and say that for the overwhelming majority of jobs, the nature of the personal interactions are crucial to vocation, as well as the other 3. Here's my proposition. Rich and rewarding human relationships develop and flourish where the state does not set the rules. They exist where freedom exists. Let me give you a very simple illustration, but an illustration which generalizes. In the old Soviet Union, I am told by everybody who was in the old Soviet Union, that if you went out, let's say, to buy a shirt in a clothing store, the chances are that the sales clerk was going to be rude and not helpful. If you go to a clothing store, I would imagine in Vilnius today, or in the United States, and you go to buy a shirt, the sales clerk is probably going to be friendly, going to try to find the options of shirts that you want to buy, and generally that your interaction with that person will be very positive. Why the difference? Well, you can be cynical about it and say, the sales clerk knows that if she is not friendly and helpful, she will get fired because the owner of the clothing store wants to make a profit, and you don't make a profit if you are not good to your customers. And that is true, but notice a couple of things. That may be the reason that she is helpful and friendly, but that also is improving the quality of her life, because the fact is it's more fun to be helpful and friendly and reciprocate with other people than it is to be rude and unhelpful. And the quality of life has been improved for everyone. You can take that basic difference between when people have to act voluntarily to get the cooperation of other people, it generates the richness and vitality of human relationships I'm talking about. In saying that, I must add a proviso. The state does have a function in aggressively preventing the use of coercion on other human beings and preventing fraud. Those are absolutely legitimate functions of the state, because if people are given the option of forcing another person to do something, some people will take advantage of that option. But if the state has done its job in preventing coercion, then the only way to get what you want in life is if the other people agree to help you get it. And that's true of relationships between husbands and wives. It's true in commercial arena. It's true in every arena of life. And it makes for the kinds of human relationships which enable family, community, faith, and vocation to be sources of deep, lasting, and justified satisfactions. How does it work? I put it in terms of two different dynamics: affiliation and engagement. By affiliation, I mean the process whereby we form attachments, big and small, and those attachments grow. Suppose, for example, that you have moved to a city and you like to go out for a morning cup of coffee, and there becomes a cafe that you especially like, and you go to that cafe every morning. You get to know the waiters, you perhaps get to know the other customers. For whatever reasons, you over time have established an affiliation with that cafe. It's just one. It's a small one. It does not define your life. But now think of that as one of the dozens or hundreds of affiliations that you establish. In every single one of those cases, you are not sitting back and saying, I will find the perfect cafe, I will find the perfect spouse, I will find the perfect place to live. But incrementally, over time, if you have the freedom to do so, you get closer and closer to the ultimate goal of having rich, vital associations in all of the institutions that can provide you with lasting and justified satisfactions with life as a whole. The most important of these, of course, affiliations have to do with your choice of spouse, with your choice of job, and the rest of it. And in those cases, too, your life must be informed by freedom in order to be able to do it. A simple example. If you live in a totalitarian state where apartments are allocated by the state arbitrarily, you end up with what you had in the Soviet Union, which was no community. I mean, you had large apartment blocks where the testimony that I have heard from people who used to live there was, not only was there no close community, there was often antagonism, there was often kind of an internal war within the apartment block where people were constantly afraid that somebody else was going to come and make life more difficult for them. Compare that to a situation where you are, let's say, a young couple, you're in your 20s, and you are going out to rent an apartment in New York City or in Chicago or some other big anonymous city. just as big and just as anonymous as Moscow. You have a certain amount of money to rent the apartment. Well, in part, you look for apartments you can afford. But you also look for apartments that contain people who share your values, who share your ways of looking at the world, people with whom you will be satisfied to live. You have limited money, so you have limited choices, but you choose a place that is as close as you can come. And you make a little more money, you have a little more freedom to choose a place that's even closer. That's how communities form, through this incremental process of voluntary affiliations done on hundreds of levels throughout your life. It only occurs when people have the freedom to choose among those options. The second source of the second dynamic through which freedom translates into happiness is engagement. By engagement, I mean the degree to which you care about something, the degree to which you are committed to something, the degree to which you use that activity as something that means something to you in terms of the important priorities in your life. Now, that kind of source of satisfaction, it seems to me, depends on three different factors. One of them is simply the importance of the function. You know, you have to spend your life from birth to death doing important things. You can't go from one trivial pleasure to another and get to be my age and feel satisfaction. Well, what are important things? Raising children. That's an obvious example of an important thing. But so is having a sense of vocation, that this is something I love to do and I love doing it well. It can be writing books, but it can also be making beautiful pieces of furniture. It can also be being a salesperson, selling shirts, but doing it really, really well, taking satisfaction in the nature of your work. But in all of these cases, it has to be a sense either that is an expression of something important in myself, or it is serving a purpose that is important. The second aspect is the degree of effort you have to put into it. You know, you can put a lot of effort into trivial things, and that just putting the effort into it alone does not make it satisfying. It has to be both a lot of effort and an important thing, but conversely, there can be very important things that you put less effort into and you take less satisfaction from. Example, I will use the Murrays. My wife, who is one of the most brilliant women I know and has her PhD from Yale and is otherwise perfectly qualified to have had a very successful career in the world of academia, chose to stay at home and care for our children full-time. I was deeply immersed in my career as they were growing up. My wife put a lot more effort into raising our children than I did. That's just a statement of fact. Now, the children are grown. They have turned out to very, very well. I take satisfaction in that, yes. Do I take the same satisfaction that she does? No. Because I'm very happy they turned out well. I also realized that my contribution to it was not that much. She knows that her contribution to that very important outcome was huge, and it correspondingly affects the level of her satisfaction. The third ingredient is closely related to that. It's not just that something is important that you're doing. It's not just that you put a lot of effort into it. but that you legitimately have a sense of being responsible for the result. It doesn't have to be full responsibility. Again, I'll go to my case. When I've written a book, I did it mostly by myself. I got help from colleagues, and my wife edits everything I write, but I can say this book definitely would not exist if it weren't for me. But if I am a steel worker and work on a great bridge, I can go look at that bridge, and even though I was only one of hundreds of people who worked on it, I can legitimately say to myself, I did work on this bridge that made that bridge better than it would have been if I had not been engaged in it. There is a legitimate sense that you were responsible, you had a significant level of responsibility for the result. I'm now referring to what Arthur Brooks, the president of AEI, my boss, refers to as earned success. And if there is one component that leads to happiness that I think is crucial, is that sense that a person has that they have been successful at something and that they have earned it. Absent that, it seems to me it's almost impossible to have self-respect. It's also impossible in some fundamental sense to be happy. I think one of the most damaging, most evil aspects of the socialist mentality is to tell people that they are not responsible for their accomplishments, that they are just a small cog in the machine. Or when the President of the United States says in a speech, business people who think that they built their business are wrong, you didn't build that. I think that kind of statement is, in its own kind of way, evil in terms of the message it sends to individuals about how they achieve happiness in life. And so, in summary, I think that when we talk about the side effect of freedom, increased wealth, we tend to diminish too much the message that we really need to be conveying to people who are not as convinced of the importance of freedom as we are. Economic productivity of the capitalist system is not why individuals wake up delighted in the morning to be alive, and it's not why they are satisfied with their lives at life's end. Those of us who are devoted to freedom can teach nothing about the advantages of capitalism that is nearly as valuable as what we can teach about the moral riches of freedom. Thank you very much.